Open up an informational meeting on the Power Act and welcome, yes, please, come forward. Our PUC. Really appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
As an incredibly important topic and what folks are really following up and seeing on the news today, so.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, good afternoon, Chair Solomon, Vice Chair Brock-Smith, members Golden, Pham, and Robinson. My name is Nolan Moser. I'm the Executive Director of the Oregon Public Utility Commission. And I'm joined by Caroline Moore. She's the Director of our Energy Program, really leads the staff team that does all this great implementation work we're going to talk about today. I'm going to largely give the presentation, but Caroline is also a subject matter expert and here for questions too. So I'll begin by just thanking a few of our bill sponsors here. So Chair Solomon, Senator Pham, Senator Golden, you are all sponsors of this important piece of legislation, HB 3546. Am I too close? Thank you, Caroline. The Power Act. And we're going to talk about implementation today. Let's see, I'll advance the slides myself. Okay, I'll begin with a little background on the commission, who we are and how we operate. Most of you have been dealing with our Legislative Affairs Director, Laura Tabor, recently, so I'm back at it for a little bit while she's on maternity leave and wanted you to know that she's doing very well. Yay. So if you have any questions about her or her newborn. All right, a little background on who we are. First, our mission, the Oregon Public Utility Commission is here to ensure that Oregonians have access to safe, reliable, and fairly priced utility services that advance state policy and promote the public interest. We're a quasi-judicial and policy organization with 3 full-time commissioners appointed by the governor, 142 employees. We regulate investor-owned utilities, and that's important in this context because we only implement the Power Act for a certain portion of the state, and I'll explain that in a minute here. So we work directly with PGE, Pacificor, and Idaho Power, as well as Northwest Natural, Cascade, and Avista. And for those entities, we do the full suite of regulation, both policy and rate regulation. We also regulate the rates of investor-owned water utility companies. We do not have oversight of consumer-owned utilities on rate regulations or terms of service. And importantly, we do a little bit of safety work with them, particularly in the wildfire context. So how do we work? These are a few of the types of dockets we engage in, filings, and actions we process specific to the electric sector. So first, rates, that's our most traditional form of regulation. Really, anytime a utility, investor-owned utility wants to change its rates, it has to work through the commission, and that's because investor-owned utilities are monopoly service providers, and the legislature has vested the commission with the power to ensure that rates are fair and equitable to consumers. So that includes automatic adjustment, filings, tariffs, really any rate change that a utility wants to put in place. We also do a tremendous amount of planning work. So Caroline's team works on resource development and procurement for our utilities, long-term planning, and we do safety and wildfire planning as well. That's a growing part of our regulatory scope. And then finally, program reviews. So we review utility programs and the implementation of utility programs directed by the legislature. That includes things like community solar, energy efficiency programming, net metering, and electric vehicle programming. And we're really reviewing for effectiveness and cost, largely. A little bit about the staff team that Caroline leads. So we have an exceptional group of analysts. These folks are mostly accountants, financial analysts. We have economists, engineers, a wide variety of subject matter experts. And in our dockets, they're usually paired with a DOJ attorney. And so in these dockets, some of what they do, they are analyzing and scrutinizing filings from our utilities. They're issuing data requests, getting questions answered through discovery, They're submitting evidence in our contested cases, filing testimony and other types of evidence. And then they're reviewing the record to help determine a recommendation for the commission. And where applicable, they're negotiating with our utilities on settlement. Really, everything we're trying to do in our contested cases is build a record so that our commission is justified in making a decision one way or the other. We're represented by the Department of Justice in these cases, who do all the things necessary to deal with a party in a litigated case. They cross-examine witnesses, submit legal briefs, make oral arguments to our commissioners. All right, so that's how we work, and we'll talk a little bit about what we've been working on with the Power Act. So the Power Act, as you know, passed in 2025, thanks to you all. We've really enjoyed working, I certainly enjoyed working with you on that bill, and our team has worked very hard to implement it in the intervening months. So the Power Act has a few core elements. First of all, it really gave us tools. That's really what it's about. Tools that, because you asked us to address the unique costs and risks associated with large data centers and computing facilities. So you gave us new tools. The first, and I think the most important new tool you gave us was the ability to create a new customer class specific to data centers and crypto mining. So that means they're separate and distinct from other industrial customers. You allowed us or required us to create minimum contract terms, both in terms of length, the amount of energy purchased, paying for infrastructure that's necessary for the new development. And then you required us to address risk mitigation, avoiding the chance of stranded asset costs for other customers, including the risk of these large new customers impacting other regulatory goals that the legislature has set, such as HB 2021 compliance. So I'll talk now about how we've implemented the Power Act. And I think our guiding principle here is to be fast and faithful with the implementation of this piece of legislation. Typically, legislation in our agency is implemented through rulemakings, but we took a different tact here. Caroline's team and others got creative, and they had already begun active, ongoing work to address this data center issue. Caroline and her team had identified this, other stakeholders had identified this as a challenge we were going to have to address. And so they had open contested dockets that were working towards a solution here. So what we did is we incorporated Power Act implementation into those open dockets and incorporated the new tools that the legislature provided as part of them. So we leveraged existing work that we were already doing, and we received some really excellent support and participation from various stakeholders. So the tribal community really stepped up and participated in these dockets. Citizens Utility Board, our ratepayer advocate, and GEI, the Green Energy Institute, represented a coalition of environmental justice groups and customer groups that were potentially impacted by data centers. Real quick on our timeline, PGE was the first utility we worked on these issues with. They had that open docket, as I mentioned. So really, we worked through the last half of 2025 on the PGE docket into the first quarter of this year. For PacifiCorp, we have started that docket, and we have essentially interim practices and protective rates in place in the PacifiCorp service territory, and we'll be working towards conclusion of that case by the end of the year. Idaho Power, we're implementing on a case-by-case basis. So essentially, if a large data center customer comes forward in that service territory, we will deal with that on a case-by-case basis. So let's talk about our results. And the first big result here came on May 7th, last month, in the form of Order 26-154. So this order really included 4 core areas where the Commission took action based on the new powers given it. First, the reallocation of costs amongst customer classes. So based on the record, using the evidence in the record, the commissioners reallocated costs between various customers, and I'll talk about the results of that here in a moment. They put in place provisions that guaranteed payments for investments made to serve data centers. So for any significant investment made in distribution or transmission infrastructure, data centers are going to need to pay for that investment. We're ensuring that the supply necessary to serve data centers is compliant with our other regulatory objectives. And then finally, that order requires very large data centers to support the system through a surcharge, an investment in energy efficiency that's going to benefit all sorts of customers and benefit the resiliency of the system. And this is a complicated order. It's a long order. I encourage you to take a look at it if you can, but it includes dozens of other economic, engineering, and policy decisions.
Do you have a quick question?
Absolutely.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I got several, but there's one before you leave this slide. Number 4 says requires very large data centers. Does that imply a distinct subclass of data centers? And if so, how's that defined?
Chair Solomon, Senator Golden, there is in the legislation, I believe, and it might be a 20 megawatt size cap for that designation. So the legislation designates anything above 20 megawatt as subject to the provision. So.
Thank you.
All right. Next, I'm going to talk about the compliance filing made by PGE on June 3rd. So this is a very dense, complex filing. It's got 200 pages of individual tariff edits, and it's over 350 pages in length. And it was filed on the 3rd. Our staff and stakeholders are currently reviewing it to make sure that it properly complies with the Commission's order. And right now, the Commission is scheduled to review this filing on July 7th. But it does give us, so it's not final yet, but it does give us some indication of the impacts of that Commission order. And a couple highlights for you to consider. First, there is based on the evidence in the case, the Commission determined these rate changes as implemented by PGE, but fundamentally there's a 29% increase for large load data center customers, a 1.3% reduction for residential customers, and reductions for the rest of the customer classes as well. There are multiple minimum contract requirements associated with this compliance filing, all, again, intended to avoid stranded investment and reduce risk to ensure the customers aren't left holding the bag. And of course, there's that new surcharge for energy efficiency. Again, not final yet, subject to further review, but we want to make sure we get this right. It's a major filing, almost akin to a rate case filing. So it has significant customer impacts and needs a thorough review, which is ongoing. But we're not done. As I explained earlier, we've got more to come here. So we're going to complete that review of that compliance filing. And I'll note that there is a period for reconsideration or appeal in this case. So a dissatisfied party may ask for reconsideration or may appeal the ruling to the appeals court. As I mentioned earlier, we have PacifiCorp coming up next. We intend to conclude PacifiCorp's case by the end of the year. And with that, I want to thank you very much for the opportunity to present today. And Caroline and I are happy to answer any questions. And again, I want to thank the sponsors and all of you for your support as we seek to implement this bill.
Great. Thank you so much. Senator Golden, did you have some questions?
Yeah, a couple if I may, Madam Chair. Thank you, really good presentation. I recall when we were discussing a passage of the Power Act, there were those who said, don't discriminate by type of facility. That's not the important metric here. Write the bill around minimum energy uses over a certain amount with this, you're in this class. And as I recall, your slide said Power Act really applies to large energy use or rather applies to data centers and crypto. So we didn't take that advice. We are referring to particular uses. In practice, does it not matter because those are the only two kinds of enterprises that consume power on this level? Or, I actually thought that argument that, the amount of consumption should be the key metric rather than what it is you're doing with the power. So how is that turning out?
Chair Solomon, Senator Golden, in large part, the significant new customers that'll come into our state, 20 megawatts and above, are going to be of this category. That doesn't mean there won't be new potential customers that have served a different type of industry, or more traditional manufacturers or something like that. That could happen. And I'll say that we have not had the opportunity to dig in to the differences in terms of load profile and energy characteristic of those two types of customers. So a manufacturing facility could have potentially different impacts on the grid than a data center that is running almost 24/7 very consistently. If a manufacturer has a different load profile and has different needs, creates different impacts on the system. So that's something that our staff has not looked into yet, and that we do anticipate digging into more in the future. Caroline?
Oh, I'll just note that that was anticipated. So the Power Act actually requires us to come back every other year and report on load trends between data centers and other customers of that size. So we haven't finished looking into it. We're currently pulling that report together because it comes to you on September 1st. And it will share insights. Sorry. For the record, I'm Caroline Moore, the Director of the Energy Program at the PUC.
One more, if I may, Madam Chair. Are we way out ahead nationally in this venture? Or are we part of a pack?
Chair Solomon, Senator Golden, I think we are way out ahead. We're starting to get calls and inquiries from other jurisdictions. Some have called this the most customer-focused piece of data center legislation in the country. So it is pretty unique. I'm not aware of any other jurisdiction that has created its own data center and crypto mining customer class.
Well, Madam Chair, this is remarkable. Thank you for this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you. I have a couple comments. That was one of mine. I was curious what you are hearing from other states because this is impressive legislation and how you have implemented it. Because again, I want to say policy is important, but how it's implemented and the way you go about communication, like you have provided all along such great communication of where you are on the timeline, because in 2025, I think it was Bob Jinks from CUB who said we had probably one of the most bold, impressive, aggressive policies that were passed, whether it was performance-based, whether it was the Fair Energy Act or whether it was the Power Act. And really, you kept right along with that, giving us good communication where you were on that. And it is exciting to see more news coverage on that. We know we've heard most recently about the difference with the PGE and the 29%. I don't know if that's something maybe that you're able to provide clarity on for us.
That was my question.
Sure, Chair Solomon. So the 29% increase associated with that'll be applied to data center loads is a direct result of this decision that the commission made implementing the bill. Again, that is not final yet. We have that's essentially a proposed rate change that is before the commission and that the commission will review likely in July. So.
Great, thank you. And my follow-up question that I had, besides the thank you and the appreciation that I want to make sure that that's reiterated, but have you ever heard of a definition that is a real specific definition? I know you're using 20 megawatts as like on the power side of it, but a definition for data center? There's a lot of conversation with folks about data centers, and I think it can be a little bit confusing because perhaps someone may consider a room that is full of servers a data center, a standalone a data center. I'm not sure if there's an absolute industry definition of what a data center is.
Yeah, Chair Solomon, members of the committee, I think it's an imperfect definition, but we utilize the NAICS code, and I don't remember for the life of me what NAICS stands for, but it's essentially economic classification system used by the federal government, and they actually have a definition, and we use that. So our law is tied to that, and it is data center crypto mining specific. I don't know if there are better classifications out there, but that's the one we're using. And I think we're pretty unique in that respect as well.
Okay, yeah, great, thank you very much. Senator Robinson.
Yeah, I was just curious more about the 29%. How'd you come up with it? And I know you're still in the process of doing it. You're thinking that they were being undercharged because the debate had to do with the infrastructure and whether they were properly paying for the infrastructure. You determined that they're, I'd be curious to know how
Sure.
you came up with
I'm going to give you, Chair Solomon, Senator Robinson, and Director Moore, please feel free to jump in after I give a very high-level response. So the order that the commission issued, as I said, ruled on dozens of technical arguments about cost allocation. So, for example, how do you allocate the cost of a new transmission line that's needed by the system? Who pays for that? How do you determine that? And we've had traditional cost allocation methodologies that have really been in place for years, and with the advent of these new large loads, that has caused a reexamination of it. So it's a causation question that the commission went through and essentially evaluated the evidence. So all the parties got in that case, data center, large industrial folks, consumer groups, and made an argument about how we should allocate those costs. And at a very high level, the commission determined that they should be reallocated differently, and that resulted in that 29% increase. Director Moore, if you have anything to add there.
Sure, Chair Solomon, Senator Robinson. To put a little bit more specificity, and again, there's a lot of moving pieces that resulted in a reallocation of what's in the existing pie of rates between customer classes. One of the biggest ones is a shift from the way that rates have been spread across customer classes to emphasize more on recent trends in load growth. So rather than just what does it look, it's what does it look like today across each class, how they're using electricity and how you can attribute that to the investments that have been made to serve the system. Just shifting more emphasis onto recent trends in growth, if that makes sense.
Vice Chair.
Thank you. Good to see you, Director.
Good to see
You
you.
as well. Thanks for your leadership at the PUC. It's been a breath of fresh air, and we're grateful. I oppose the Power Act, if you may remember, for a number of reasons. And so just a few questions. Data centers, the way that I look at it, they really have constant load, right? I mean, they don't fluctuate. They are, so I look at that as a steady paycheck, if you will, to the utility. One could argue because of the steady paycheck to the utility that it helps balance the residential and commercial bills because they are providing a constant stream of revenue to that utility. And if energy is relative, right? You produce it, it's out there. We got solar panels, and we don't have a lot of storage, but and we have wind, and then of course you have natural gas that turns a turbine to create energy when needed to deal with the load. That is when it gets expensive for residential customers, when everybody wakes up in the morning and turns on their coffee pot and their hot water heater, and why I think it's crazy that some of my colleagues want to just go ahead and put everything by wire and not have the offset of natural gas because you're only impacting the health, life, and safety of Oregonians. Putting everything by wire, especially if we're going to have extreme heat and cold events and ice storms and so on and so forth. So that's a long way for me saying, am I right in thinking in this whole energy space that we have users and electric utilities invest in generation because there's someone to buy that energy from? That if we did not have data centers, being consumers of energy, there would be less of an investment because in the generation in order to supply the energy?
Chair Solomon, Vice Chair Brucksmith, there's certainly logic to that. I would note that the objective, the overall objective is the bill is to ensure a fair allocation of costs and that we do no harm first. And I think that data centers and the rapid growth in that sector is unprecedented and something we really want to make sure we're prepared for. So that's why these cost allocation questions are so important. So this piece of legislation and this decision, it does recognize that there's value potentially to the system from data centers. But those data centers that customer class needs to provide the data and provide the demonstration that that value is occurring. And I'll say that there's some unique provisions in the bill which allow a utility to work with a data center to essentially create a special contract. And we're actually looking at that in the context of some of these other cases I mentioned, where if that value to the system can be demonstrated, or if the data center can provide, unique resources. Some of these are the most well-capitalized companies on earth. If they can bring resources to the table to help support Oregon in terms of infrastructure development and achieving our clean energy goals, the utilities have the ability to come to an arrangement through that special contract process.
Thanks. And I appreciate you reminding us of the provisions within the legislation that allows that, because one of the things that I do support, of course, is the fact that any type of data center needs to pay for the infrastructure costs associated with their development, right? We should not be subsidizing the infrastructure costs associated with their facility through consumers, residential, commercial customers. If they need a substation, they should have to pay for building a substation, right? We need to fix our transmission. It shouldn't take 20 to 30 years to permit transmission by any means. And so, but to your point, so if for example, a data center wanted to site a solar as a form, and then battery storage as a form of power for their facility, they would have the opportunity through the legislation to work out an agreement to do so.
Chair Solomon, Vice Chair Brucksmith, absolutely they would.
Awesome. Well, and and again, I appreciate all the work, but to my colleagues on this committee, some will be here and some won't. I really think that we need to take a holistic view at data centers because there's a lot of misinformation out there when it comes to data centers. That misinformation was used in campaigns this last cycle and was, frankly, they lied. And it's not okay. We need to make sure that, I want to see siting of data centers in areas that fit our land use goals across the state, but those in itself need to be fixed because we have soil types that are regarded as farmland that are piles of rocks in Central Oregon. And so you couldn't even grow wheat on it, let alone something else. And so there is opportunities where we can have placement, but we also need to, there's a lot of misinformation that is coming in, and I'm not trying to create this conspiracy theory, but it's a national security issue to make sure that we are ahead in AI. It's a national security issue that we have data centers that are domestically located. And we can't have foreign adversaries that are ahead of us in AI development because that would put America and our allies in grave jeopardy. And so we need to come to a place where we have the opportunities to make sure that we can not only supply the energy for the load, but also the siting and the opportunities that come with it, such as the city of Prineville that has enjoyed the economic development that has occurred, as well as other communities. So thanks.
Thank you. Senator Robinson?
Yeah, getting back to the 29% question, and you answered very broadly, because I too, of course, want the data centers to pay for any infrastructure they bring in. I don't think we ever had a disagreement on that point. When you, and I know you're still in the flux, at some point I would very much like to know, some precise calculations, because of course what the numbers look like now is, we lowered everyone's raised theirs, and I presume that somewhere in the analysis you determined that there was infrastructure that they hadn't paid for in some way. So I would be very curious if we had actual numbers and made some representative examples, and there should be specific examples because there aren't that many data centers saying this substation or whatever, here's what we came to. So I would really love to see an actual breakdown, just so I understand it better.
Chair Solomon, Senator Robinson, we can absolutely get you a breakdown of how the calculation led to that result, and we'll follow up with you.
That'd be wonderful. Thank you.
Senator Golden?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Has the Governor's Advisory Council on Data Centers, have you interfaced with them? Have they asked you for information? Do you plan to talk to them and tell them basically what you've told us today?
Chair Solomon, Senator Golden, we do have a staffer supporting that committee on background, providing basic information, and I believe we are scheduled to sit down with them and go over some of the results of the Power Act as well later in June.
Good, thank you.
Thank you. I just really wanted to ask a clarifying question. So the Power Act was really about looking at creating the rates and the infrastructure for our investor-owned utilities. But this is already something, because I think if I remember in our conversations, this is already something that COUs already have the ability to negotiate some of those infrastructure and those rate costs as it is. Is that correct?
Chair Solomon, we're not as familiar with how the COUs are interacting with the data center customer class.
Okay.
We know that when we have data center development on a regional basis, that will impact our investor-owned utility customers one way or the another, because if for no other reason than just the general demand for generation in the region. So I think for us, we just don't have the information to kind of tell you how those interactions are going. So.
Okay, thank you. And I'll just raise up what Vice Chair said too. Thank you so much for your work on this. Really want to also elevate, this was a bill that I was really proud to work on with Representative Pam Marsh. I know she really spearheaded this work in the House. And just, again, thank you so much for your solid communication all the way through and continuing to keep us informed. So thank you very much. So,
Thank you.
yeah. With that, I'm going to close the